Welcome to the September edition of the KMC Lunch and Learn. This month, this day, we are going to talk about, from a building owner's and manager's perspective, the tactical use of IoT sensors and data analytics to optimize building occupancy cost, ESG goals, site selection, cyber operational resilience, and financial valuation. It's perhaps my favorite fusion of topics, and to kind of symbolize that fusion, we have an incredibly gifted and diverse group. We have Stuart Fielden from Siemens Real Estate. We have Aaron Altscher from Carr Properties. We have Mark Bulmash from Bulmash Real Estate Advisors. And then we have Tim Vogel from KMC Controls, who will each introduce themselves and say hello. And we'll go around the table, and then we'll get into the topic. And so, without further ado, I'd like to start with Stuart. Stuart, would you please introduce yourself and what you're doing at Siemens, and anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, thanks, Ari. Thanks for having me. My name is Stuart Field, and I work for Siemens. I represent large enterprise clients from a digital offerings perspective. So our new go-to-market digital, primarily software-focused options, and involved in many national and global accounts for Siemens. So direct experience in the real estate market for about 20 years now.
Thank you very much, Stuart. And let's just go round circle here. We're going to go to Aaron next. At least that's how it appears on my screen.
Thanks, Ari. Good to see everybody. Aaron Altscher with Carr Properties. I am the head of technology at Carr, and we're based out of Washington, D.C. We're a commercial real estate owner, operator, and developer. We are slowly dipping our toe into some multifamily building, but Carr is focused on data. We have a big appetite for data. And we have some experience with IoT data collection, analytics, and some AI tools to optimize our data that look forward to discussing today.
Thank you so much, sir. Let's keep going to Tim.
Hey, everybody. My name is Tim Vogel. Excuse me. I'm the VP of Connected Solutions here at KMC Controls. I also work with Ari around some consulting opportunities that come our way. My primary focus is our cloud-based software solution, KMC Commander. I also do quite a bit around cybersecurity, and perhaps you could see the panel behind me putting together with a Veridify-based solution we're calling Dome, which secures your OT operational networks. And also, from time to time, I like to put together a podcast and share great stories from people around the industry. And in fact, I was at a Carr property last week recording our next season of the Building Geniuses podcast, which I'm very excited to bring you. But that's all I can say for now. The rest is a secret. But no, it's great to be here, and I'm so glad that our guests are here with us today as well.
Thank you, Tim. Mark, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Mark Bulmash, CEO at Bulmash Real Estate Advisors. After having spent 37 years in the development world, working across multiple product types, as well as mixed use and master plan projects, I've stepped back, formed my own consulting company where, among other things, I'm working with family offices, other developers. I'm working with KMC to advise some of their clients as well on the challenges and the opportunities in the real estate world.
Thank you, sir. Those in the audience, if you can look around the table and see who's at each seat, you see each cycle. You see someone who is working directly with an owner or a landlord, or someone who says, I have a vision, I want a certain building or a certain campus or a certain portfolio, and or a best use of a piece of land. So they have a mind like Mark to go to and say, help me figure this out, translate my thought into reality. And so he does that. And so then you have this next phase where there's kind of a partnership with someone like Aaron, either as a development partner or maybe once it is developed to lease the property or to manage the property or to do something to create value for tenants or something in the cycle. And then you have in between, you have all this capability provided by companies that include Siemens and KMC Controls who say, we want the experience for your tenants, whether they're employees, whether they're contractors, visitors, VIPs of any type. We want them to feel safe. We want them to be comfortable, whether it's through the air quality, through the temperature. We want the building to, in general, fulfill all those goals. So when you think about the theme for this discussion, it is the tactical use of all this stuff, all these sensors and data to optimize everything we've targeted. So before we go around with questions, I want to show everyone a really, let's call it a flow chart, but it kind of summarizes perhaps one way of looking at things. And I'm only going to show this for a minute, but you can see this is called a swim lane. And the top row of this swim lane is about the user experience. So for example, someone's in a building and they might say, oh my gosh, I'm too hot or I'm too cold, or I can't open or close the door. So then what's going on? Or the facilities management person might have their perspective and say, okay, well, is the equipment running? And the integrated facility manager might say, well, is it part of a building management system? And the asset manager might say, well, gosh, damn, I need to find a way to reduce cost and increase cash flow or somehow make more money from this. And then the operational technology people say, well, we just have stuff we want to sell, we want to implement, we want people to gain value from it. But in doing so, you have all this stuff going on in the background. You have standards, you have cybersecurity protocols, you have all kinds of technologies and rules for airflow and for energy management. So I'm going to stop sharing. And so if you think about that kind of visualization in mind, and so I want to go to, if you don't mind, I want to go to Mark first. And if you look at a recent CRE sector report, I think in this case it was produced by CBRE over the last few weeks, and it says that, okay, that to increase office attendance, companies will need to offer employees top-notch amenities, both in and around the workplace, boosting demand in the most desirable and accessible submarkets. So you can go on and look at this, and one of the interesting stats that come out of it is, wow, there's a lot of capacity out there. There's a lot of vacancy. It's some say it's peaked, some say let's wait. And there's still construction going on with the new rate cuts that'll probably start to accelerate. So Mark, my question is, when you think about decision logic, what are your thoughts? What kind of thoughts whirl around your mind today in September of 2024 versus 10 years ago in 2014? In particular, what if someone that works for you says, hey, I want to allocate a chunk of our budget towards IoT sensors and data analytics. And what do you think? What do you think, Mark, on project XYZ? Can we justify that? So,
well, yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Look, one of the things I just want to put some context in, that report talks about vacancy approaching 20% nationally, right? And they're hoping, or they're projecting, that it might top out at the end of this year. Anecdotally, I've been talking to office brokers out there who feel like, we probably have to wait until 25, 26 to see what's happening with leases and when they turn over and how much space tenants are going to end up ultimately consuming. So I think there's a lot of stress in the office market, and there's a bifurcation. There's those who are doing really well and crushing it because they have all those amenities that you're talking about. And there are others who are in older buildings in lesser locations. They can't walk to, they got to jump in their car to go to other places. And so they're in a world of hurt. All right. So I think that's the lens that we have to look through right now. You mentioned 2014. By then, we had been 5 years into a recovery from the Great Recession. Right now, I think it's still early. We really have had a recession in the real estate business the last 18 months or so. And so if I'm looking at a project right now, the numbers don't work for the most part. I mean, they're really tough with construction costs, the lack of financing, the high cost of financing, right? But I think there's a real opportunity to get ready to launch with rates coming down. We're beginning to see some green shoots coming up. And I think that, right now, if I'm and I'll take 2 points of view, a landlord and a tenant. I think a landlord, I want to make sure that my building is as competitive as it can be, but I'm strapped, right, with the numbers. So I'm going to try to deal with things that reduce my costs, right, in terms of energy efficiency and so forth. But I'm also going to deal with things that now have kind of become entry-level options,
Sure.
contactless
Yep.
entry,
Sure.
improving air quality, right? And we can get into those things later. I think that from a tenant's standpoint, they want to know, how much space do I need, right? We're consulting for people right now who they want to know how much space do I need, especially in the hybrid world. And I think what you're going to see, they want to encourage a higher density of activity in their office space, and probably are leaning towards reducing the space they have, making it more flexible. And so, from a IoT standpoint, maybe I'm figuring out some inexpensive solutions to identify what is the activity in the office today, so that I can.
Perfect transition.
Right.
So if you don't mind, I want to transition to Aaron. Aaron, from Car Properties perspective, when you look at, I mean, you have some of the most fantastic properties around the country, in really marquee properties. And what kind of decisions is your team making, when you kind of build on Mark's insight here?
Yeah, then thanks for the compliments, Ari. I do agree. Our construction, design, and development division is top notch, and we do have the best assets in the industry. I mean, I'll echo where Mark was going. There is a flight to quality. I think that's accepted in the industry today. Car's fortunate that we have the majority of our buildings, the far majority of our buildings, in the Class A trophy class space. The reality is, even in those spaces, it's still competitive and it's still challenging. People aren't knocking down the doors, regardless of the asset class. It's just a little bit easier. In that upper echelon of the market, though, it's critical to pay attention as much as possible to the experience, because the flight to quality is there, and people expect not only the amenities of 10 years ago, but they expect the amenities of today, which get into, is that
One
a
second.
for
Well, yeah,
calls
one
and
second. I
timeout?
want to unpack that word quality. Maybe it's a thing between you and Mark and Stuart and Tim, but what do you mean by quality? I mean, when are you talking about, the temperature is great, or it's easy to get into the building, or could you unpack that a little bit?
Maybe from my perspective, where I was going was, maybe it's a flight to experience.
Yeah,
And
I like that.
It's not just the material. It's not just, oh, you have quality like finishes, and the lobby's beautiful. I feel like that was quality 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Quality is about the experience. It's like, do you have modern technology? Do you have modern conference centers? Do you have mobile app with access control? Do you have
But there's a limit, though, Aaron. I mean, no matter
and
what, you want to provide all this, but there's a limit to how much you can spend. What is the logic, whether it's a formal, payback calculation. I want to get whatever we do. I want to see payback in 3 months or less. But what is, if you could, you give us a little, pull the curtain back a little bit, help us understand your ROI thing.
I mean, it's experience. I mean, it's there is no like direct payback to, the investment in keyless access control. It's the responsibility of the company, from the operators, the marketers, the leasing agents, to use that as tools in your tool belt when you're talking about leasing, talking about lease renewals, and showing the customers that the owners continue to invest in the experience of not only them but their employees. Now, where payback comes into a bit of a play is on some of the amenities that offer energy efficiencies. I think our conversation was going to get us there, but air quality, we can consider it. I think it should be a standard, but I guess you could say it's an amenity for a company that does track indoor air quality, and have third-party sensors, and have a BMS or BAS, and have a trained team on how to use these, and have automation on what to do with the data. Ultimately, if you're the CFO, you're looking at expenditure versus payback. That story is in line with efficiencies. If you're looking at utilization, the utilization model has changed. Ari, you and I have looked into data together about building occupancy. We've seen the trends that have changed. Simply put, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are far more active than Mondays and Fridays. Mm-hmm. To confirm that, if you have third-party sensors in the space for occupancy, third-party sensors in the space that can, read CO2 levels and temperatures, there's low-hanging fruit where you can optimize your BAS and BMS.
I love that. I love that.
For payback. That's kind of the story. Go ahead.
I was going to say, go ahead. I want to pivot to Stuart. I had a question to build on what you just said, but go ahead. Please finish your thought.
No, that's it. I'd love to hear Stuart's comment because he's really in the space. I'm just the user of it. Yeah, Stuart, where are you on this energy optimization around, the change in occupancy?
Please.
Yeah,
you
great
took
question.
The words out of my mouth.
I think let me start with just a thought on the market. I think the very large occupiers and the very large landlords, it's still a custom approach, right? Versus, let's say, it's all out of the box and ready to you push a button and you get the outcomes. And the outcomes have changed. I mean, we're talking about decarb and sustainability, then occupant experience, and then what I call operational transformation, which is, operationally, how do we drive the cost out so that we can achieve those two outcomes in a cost-effective way? And so, what we're working on is not only we participate in that custom market, but there are many other markets where clients still want those outcomes. And so we're in the process of packaging everything we just discussed into an out of the box solution so that customers can hit the easy button, especially the ones that don't have the in-house teams, right? They don't all have BAS teams. They don't all have energy engineers. So I think that's the next phase of the market is these, we call it portfolio rationalization, right? Many customers have bought too many applications. And I saw this in healthcare. You'd walk into an OR room and there would be 3 thermostats on the wall, one for facilities, one for biomed, and one for the nursing staff, right? So that's an organizational alignment issue around collapsing that infrastructure down so that all departments can have access to the data. And of course, it's part of that's a data strategy. So that's what we're working on, and I see that as kind of the next phase of the market. And it's interesting to hear that. I think one of the shifts is it used to be we would have to justify the ROI, but we are seeing much more evidence that it's becoming a cost of doing business. So figuring out how to do it at the lowest cost and the highest value. I think that's the next phase that we're entering in, if we're not already.
I know Tim has a question, but before we transition, I want to just ask you one more little question, and maybe others have a thought. But is there, I guess, 2 things. Number one, when you talk about outcomes, are there 1 or 2 or 3 metrics you have in mind to measure outcomes? Number 2, is there a use case you can share that won't require everyone on the call to have an NDA to say, We went into a client, they're in this sector and this is what we had going, and we applied these performance measures up front. We were aligned on them, and then, a year later, this is the outcome.
Yep. So I think decarb and energy metrics are important. Those need to be in place. Those need to be kind of pre-approved within the organization for them to be effective. Facilities can't carry that torch alone. I think there's various ways to do occupancy. We have an occupancy score now where we do a simple kind of red, yellow, green based on multiple variables in an algorithm in the software. That's another approach. I've seen occupant surveys. Not sure the effectiveness of the surveys. I've seen in the workplace experience app metrics around reactive maintenance. And then in addition to that, I've seen facilities teams track reactive maintenance around spaces. And then lastly, I would say kind of the traditional fault detection and diagnostics that we play in. If you look at that on a per asset basis, you can get a feel for the performance of the space based upon kind of the reactive maintenance of the faults and the reactive maintenance of the asset. So
amazing. That's exactly what I was looking for. I appreciate the insight. I know that others on this panel will resonate. Tim, could you, like, what if that information is coming to you, first of all, what does that do for your mapping through Commander, and then in general, what trending are you seeing right now with those kinds of KPIs?
So there's a paper Microsoft came out with, it is probably 7 or 8 years ago at this point, and it was all around the payback of IoT. And they were looking at IoT as a whole across industry, smart buildings, sure, healthcare, yes. I mean, it was everything. And the way they broke it down is the quantifiable ROI and then the qualitative ROI on top of that. And they said a lot of times the quantifiable ROI itself is not going to bring you over the payback ledge, if you will. And so now you have to look at those qualitative things. It's kind of like looking at marketing. When you look at marketing, how much is your brand equity worth in terms of dollar value and payback? What is Car Properties value and a reputation score that goes up by 1? A lot of that is just kind of, it's qualitative, and maybe you could put a number to it, maybe you can't. And I think IoT, and we could take the word IoT out of it also and just say, sensing technologies, monitoring technologies, control technologies. The ROI around that is going to be nuanced and diverse. There are some projects I don't think will ever win because they're only looking at quantitative variables, and it's difficult to really get across ease of use. Hey, this is a lot easier to use and it's easier to access that data. What is it worth to you? And no one really has a good answer.
So let's dig a smidgen deeper into that comment. Are you saying that with regards to properties built now, quote unquote now, or is it more applicable to older buildings? Are you seeing kind of like two buckets?
I don't look at old buildings or new buildings. Maybe you could look at it in terms of like recently commissioned buildings and ones that have been drifting for a long time.
From a demand standpoint, though, are you seeing more demand from recently commissioned buildings or not?
I am not. I'd say it's very evenly mixed in terms of what I'm seeing. Older buildings are looking to retrofit and gain a lot of energy efficiencies they haven't had before, and with that, bring along tenant or occupant experience. And newer buildings are trying to build that in because they're recognizing the increased demand and competitiveness in the space.
All right, so let's do a blank sheet here. I want to go back to you, Mark. What if a client comes to you and they say, Mark, I know you and your team are brilliant and do brilliant work. So I have confidence. I'm going to give you a blank check. And I want you to design for me a 1.5 million square foot building downtown Dallas. And it's going to be 50% occupied by my company. Let's say I have some tech company. And the remainder, I'm going to lease it. But I don't want to be leased to any. I want it to be leased to no more than 10 tenants that are also classified kind of in my category as tier 1. So My question to you, Mark, with all your background, what would you do? What kind of, in general, could
Well,
you kind of walk us through that?
I think I would break it up into three buckets, right? One is obviously the sustainability and reduction of costs through more efficient systems. Another is improving safety and security. And then the third is improving the user experience, improving productivity, and reducing the friction to using a building or a space, right? So the sustainability and reducing cost issue, everybody's pretty much heard it. I think that the thing that I would strive to do is ultimately get to those dashboards, right, that are monitoring everything, but ultimately looking at something like AI to kind of instantaneously, change things according to, if CO2 is going up too much, it's increasing airflow, that kind of thing, right? The things that the old dumb control systems didn't do before, right? In terms of safety and security, not only is it digital access, I mean, keys, when you have, 1,000, 10,000 people using a building and everybody's got a key, right? That's not really a very secure building, right? Moving to contactless digital entrance is a key thing. But it also, by the way, introduces something new in terms of cybersecurity, right? So that has to come in with it. But probably
in terms of making sure the building itself can't be hacked.
Yes.
Or are you saying something else?
Yeah, the building can't be hacked. You can't get in it. You can't manipulate the systems themselves.
Okay.
I think in terms of the user experience, I think that you're going to see, especially having experienced the pandemic, a real move to improve indoor air quality. And it's not just about particulates and volatile organics. It's going to start getting into carbon dioxide levels and biologics, right? I think soon you're going to be able to sense whether you're having issues and stuff, and maybe be able to, prevent breakouts from happening. Ideally,
it sounds like you're describing what I know as the car experience. And Aaron, I mean, could you tell us first of all what the car experience is, and if Mark was doing that building, let's say through you, how would you interact with all that? That sounds. By the way, Mark, thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah, there are definitely no biologics in the car experience at all. No, indoor air quality is a little complicated. It's somewhat political. And I'll just share CAR's journey of how we implemented, what the journey was like, and where we're gaining value. Because it has somewhat evolved, to be honest. Even though we were looking at it and started implementing sensors pre-COVID, the program blew up when we all had to work from home. And blow up by meaning that I went out and installed SenseWare, Attune, indoor air quality sensors in every mechanical room in our portfolio, in every return, floor by floor, tower by tower. We install these devices to start collecting data. For one, it's to make sure that that our system is sort of like a validation of our systems doing what our BMS is telling them that we're doing. And it was initially a learning exercise. And what we found is they weren't. There were all these systems that were miscalibrated. Nodes weren't working. You guys know this best. You're in the BMS space, but we find all these nodes need to be calibrated. And it's not the set points we're setting stuff to is not actually what's existing out in the environment. So it's initial this QA, we can tune it right. So we can actually deliver what we're thinking we're delivering out of BMS. Then came the storytelling around it. Our operations teams go out to our customers and say, hey, we have this program where the data is being monitored. We have alerts going to engineers, and we're tightly monitoring better than ASHRAE standards of where our air quality should be. So what does that mean? You should feel safe to bring people back to the office. We're monitoring as Mark's point, CO2 levels very closely. We're monitoring humidity. We're monitoring temperature, things that will reduce the likelihood of viral spread. So the response from our customers, it would vary depending on the type of business and their culture. But largely they were very appreciative of us, implementing this effort. And depending on the tenant, we saw a return. Sometimes we did not. But it was.
I read about FTI Consulting. Do you think that was a factor in their decision process?
I can't say.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, I read it publicly. It wasn't private. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but I don't want to.
No, what I'm saying is there are let's call it really sophisticated clients out there, and I would classify FTI as a sophisticated client. The kinds that I was kind of trying to inference in my scenario with Mark a moment ago, who might say, you know what, I want the car experience because of A, B, and C. They give me that. I'm willing to pay top rent to get that experience.
Yeah, and indoor air quality is part of the picture. I mean, I don't want to discredit our marketing and events team, because when you talk about experience, IAQ and sensors and technology is part of it. But there's also this large on-prem presence where we have an event coordinator that hosts really nice monthly events that brings the community together, that brings in local vendors, and so on and so forth. So it's the on-site experiential piece. The car experience, as our CEO would define it, is thoughtful design, engaging moments, and the technology pillar. So it sort of brings together the space. It brings together the team, the events, the hospitality, the sort of personality, the personableness of everything, and then also the ease of technology to move about the buildings, to work and be your most efficient.
Thank you.
So to land the plane on the IEQ piece, and I'll get to basically where we are today, we wound up overwhelmed with data, to be honest with you. We have all these sensors. We turn them on. I set them up to maximum. I wanted the most data as possible, maximum frequency, so I look
like every minute you're getting a read every minute.
Yes, it was even less than that at the beginning, and I'm I'm collecting 2 million rows of data a day. Okay, wow. What am I doing with that other than just taking down my server, and making my support team upset with me? So after we kind of right-sized it, we had to figure out automation. And I don't think that journey is ever done, but where we are today with automation is I built this basically an aggregation script that rolls up the data in a summary level, and if it exceeds or a particular threshold or is under a particular value that we feel comfortable with, then we pipe that into through an integration to facility management. So then it creates a workflow from there.
I got it.
So that's, and that's where things have gone. And we've seen everything from just sensors that have not been calibrated correctly to people spray painting in their office. Honestly,
oh my God,
you see crazy stuff.
Tim and Stuart, I mean, the things that Aaron is saying, I mean, it could be driven perhaps by a design from Mark, but the things he's saying, I mean, your sensors and your workflows, you're mapping this. So would one of you like to comment on what he just said?
I'll comment briefly and then turn it over to Stuart for the bulk of it. But it comes down to requirements. What are you looking to do? What are you hoping to accomplish? And you don't always have, when you're kind of on a fact-finding mission, you don't always have what the end goal is in mind. You know that it could be beneficial, for instance, to know what your VOC levels are, but you don't really understand how I'm going to use this to improve my experience or to improve my ventilation. And so it's good to try to get as much of that up front as possible. When we talk about projects, we'll always say plan big, start small, and then scale fast. The planning big part is what's the overall goal and picture and vision, and then start small with a pilot project with a small portion of that, and then scale that out as much as you can as it makes sense for your budget, time, and payback. So those are, I was hearing a lot of that, but one of the best problems to have is I have all this data and baseline information, and now what can I go do with it? That's much better than I don't know what my humidity is because I did bottom level investment in my sensing capabilities to only do temperature because I was trying to cut costs up front.
Yeah.
Stuart?
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges for the industry, I guess from a technology perspective, is in a single building site, if a museum or just an independent building, you can pick one manufacturer, or it's easier to standardize from a product perspective or a technology perspective. At an enterprise level or multi-site level, especially crossing multiple geographies, it's harder to do that. It's harder to standardize on a product. So moving the data across data silos still seems to be a challenge, and we're seeing a lot of evolution. Facilities in engineering typically doesn't have that skill set. So a lot of companies have these liaisons now. They maybe have a smart buildings title, or you're starting to see different titles in the market. The market experimenting with kind of different titles and structures. So moving the data, and not only moving the data, but beginning to automate the workflows. And it seems like very quickly we were I think many of us were at Realcomm. I think chatbots for facilities management was not a thing. Now it's almost become a minimum entry. It seems, right? Everybody has a chatbot for facilities management. So I think as those new tools continue to evolve, we'll start to break down those data silos in a more meaningful way. Because to Aaron's point, I'm not the first one to say this, but obviously a lot of data doesn't equal outcomes. And what's missing in a lot of the facilities management discussions is automating the workflows, which one of the first questions clients always ask us is, how do I take the actionable insights that you're providing me and basically get them into the CMMS system so that I can take action and measure those work orders. And that's still not an easy thing to do in today's world.
They're asking the right question though, Stuart. I mean, that is the right question. I'm curious, and I kind of want to go around the table on this. Are you seeing that there's like thought leadership on this? Like there's certain sectors, like maybe aerospace or data centers or office, or are there certain sectors that are asking that question more so?
Yeah, I think I'll answer it in a second. I think the other variable to consider is another consistent data point from customers is this idea of one to many and scaling facility operations. So instead, the days of having a facilities manager per building is quickly going to a facilities manager for 5 buildings. Be curious, Aaron, where's Carr at on this journey? But scaling the properties, doing more with less, which is all around.
I think we should go to your question first, to Aaron, and then go back to mine. Aaron, I'm very curious about your response to Stuart's question.
Yeah, I'd say in a perfect world, Stuart, we would. The reality is, unless you're only doing new development, you're buying existing buildings with existing systems, and what that leaves you is, you're left with fragmented systems that don't have like the coveted single pane of glass. So we are in a world where operators have to do more with less, and teams are managing multiple buildings with different systems. And we're trying through, a single facility management system. Like, for example, we've gotten there through our sensor programs as a single system, CCTV, access control. Like, we have tried to single thread as much as we can. BMS is just tough because just the nature of our business, where we're investing and buying, buildings we did not build. But yeah, I mean, there are tools nowadays that I know it's like a building advisor that sit on top and offer a layer. And I think those are great, and a place we should go.
Mark, were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, I think that all of this, suggests that ultimately we're going to use AI to run these things, right? Because it's so much information, and we're obviously not there because we haven't done the building blocks to get there. But You
Wait a
know,
minute, Mark, are you saying
there's
this
so much.
as a co-owner of NVIDIA, or are you saying this in general?
No, I just think that this is something where the technology has the potential to really help because of the profusion of data that we're seeing, right?
Yeah.
And can make changes, right? Rather than we have these dumb building systems that, you know, if the temperature goes up above a certain threshold, the air kicks on, right? I mean, it's more dynamic than that and makes for a better experience. We've all been in buildings where, you know, on one side of the building it's hot and on the other side of the building it's comfortable, right? And anyway, I just think that it lends itself to that. And the other question or point that I was going to make is, how can we encourage productivity for people
Right.
in office space, right? And this is a tenant issue, and there are different issues out there. White noise that, you know, it is reacting to the ambient sounds out there and things like that, right? Anyway, it's a point that I know it's a digression
Oh, well,
from
Mark, hold on a second.
Yeah.
You are the person on this call that probably knows better than most. What is the workplace environment of 2024 going into 2025? Do people want white noise? Do they want absolute chaos?
Well,
Do they want quiet? Do they
interesting
want
thing
lights
is,
flashing on and
I
off?
think the days of these big open bullpens is over, right? It really was driven by costs on the part of tenants and landlords. It never was an optimal place for people to work in because there were so many distractions. And if you walk around, every other person's wearing headphones, right? And trying to keep their head down and not pay any attention to all the different noise that's going on. But, you know, if you walk around like Heinz, I walked around one of their Class A plus buildings recently in Houston and experienced the deadening of, you know, with the white noise there and how much quieter it seemed, right? And so even in the open spots of the office, the sound levels were down, and you know, it's applying noise cancellation technology to the ambient
All right.
environment.
So from it's probably good news for the Siemens and KMCs of the world, because if the inference is we're going back to more dedicated spaces, that's if we're going back to more dedicated, like Mark gets his own office and it's only his office, then there's going to be lots of micro environment controls. Like you can control the air quality in your office, and then Tim can map that, you know, and then everyone can apply all the automations to that.
Well, and even things like shade, right? When if too much light's coming in, something
Sure.
comes in to right adjust it. And I'm not necessarily saying everybody's going back to an office. I'm just saying that the workspaces are going to be designed in such a way that people have more personal spaces and it cuts down on the distractions. And I also, I was listening to an interesting podcast by the co-CEOs of Gensler, who were talking about office space being broken down into spots where individuals like are doing hardcore work, concentrated work, and then collaborative areas, right? And I wanted to introduce the idea of flexible space that, you know, as your needs change throughout the day, you can reconfigure things, right? Smart walls and things like that to allow for more collaborative space, or, you know, allow
So
more.
small walls implies the inclusion of certain sensors like white
Right.
noise generators, power strips, air
Well,
quality
even
sensors,
sensors that pick
occupancy
up
sensors.
activity by people in a
Right, right.
space and what are they working on, right?
Interesting.
There's technology already out there to do that. So I think it's a really powerful thing. If we really want people in the office, we need to think differently about how we encourage their productivity and improve it over home, where, you know, you have your own set of distractions, whether it's
Right.
young kids or pets or, you know, TVs or radios or what.
So final point here, and it might be a question directed at Tim, but everyone should feel welcome. That what you just described, what Aaron described, some of the scenarios that Stuart was describing, it all works as long as no one shuts it down. So some adversarial actor delivers a payload and says, okay, the door won't work anymore, you can't get in, or the elevator won't work anymore, you can't get in, or I'm not going to allow the air conditioning to turn on. So, I mean, Tim, what's out there to keep all this from, to make sure that the operations are resilient, that they won't be vulnerable?
So to answer this in the 30 seconds we have remaining, I would say look forward to season 3 of the Building Geniuses podcast, filmed at Carr Properties in Washington, D.C., where we talked exactly about that. What is the process? What's the plan? What's a baseline analysis? What's important to all the multiple stakeholders? It is a multifaceted approach, and it's not just any sort of single box that you're going to install or even a single policy that you're going to put in place. And it's also going to go back from everything from the genesis of a building idea on the design side all the way through operations. And there are lots of tools, services, solutions, and technologies available to you to help you accomplish that.
And with that, we close out our call. I think that was perfect, and as if we're living in the same brain. So welcome. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you back next month on the third Thursday. I'm sorry, on the fourth Friday. My mistake. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
Bye. See ya.
Bye.